What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Today we're here with JW of this really interesting documentary that I ran into not too long ago. And just really was thought-provoking, and he hit on such a taboo topic, and I figured somebody who made such an interesting documentary is probably an interesting dude, so I figured contact him and get him on. And obviously, as people who listen to the show know, I'm a huge fan of documentaries. I love thought-provoking documentaries, anything that kind of makes you look at things outside the box, and that's definitely the least I could say about this film. It's called Are All Men Pedophiles? And I think the title itself kind of grabs your attention, and you're just like, what the hell is this about, you know? So I just really I'm like, I have to see this. And you know, you didn't know what road it was going to take you, and but it ended up being super interesting, and it had a lot more to do with history and human culture and how culture molds our perceptions and stuff like that, and so it had a lot to do with all that stuff. So it's super interesting. I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix. So let me just thank JW for being with me today.
Thank you. Can I start with a question for you?
Yeah.
What were you actually expecting of the film? Because when you were talking about it, you're like, okay, I was actually expecting this, but then that happened.
That's a good question. You know, it's funny because like a lot of times when I'm looking for something to watch, I'll find something that might be weird or different, and it either ends up turning out really bad, because I mean, we've all seen those documentaries or films where people try too hard to be artistic, and then there's nothing to it. Like, you're like, okay, I watched something that was really weird, but did I get something from it, you know? And with this, it was weird because I didn't know if it was going to be something about, like, I didn't know if it was going to be like a feminist group that was going to be anti-men and be like, oh, men are pedophiles, you know, like, or I didn't know what it was going to be. So when I started watching it, it was actually way more interesting than I even expected, because you went through, you know, to Stone Age, and, you know, you really did your research on this film, and it was just so well put together. And it's funny because it's a little over an hour film, and you would think, like, okay, this one topic can't keep you held on for an hour, but it did. And it was funny because my girlfriend always falls asleep during documentaries. I'm always watching them. She's always passing out. And she stayed up for this whole thing. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe you're staying up for this. And she's like, oh, this is really interesting. And I think there's something intriguing about trying to figure out. I think it's why people are intrigued with, like, psychology and stuff like that, or philosophy. Like, we are always trying to figure out ourselves, what motivates us, what makes us look at things a different way. And I think that's what probably kept her attached, and that's what kept me attached. So what motivated you to do such a taboo topic?
Okay. It's a long story, but let me start at the beginning. So I studied at the University of Royal Arts, the Academy of Royal Arts in The Hague. And I think I was in the second year, and I was walking through the whole of graphic design. And I saw a fellow student, a female student, and I stopped and I stared at her for about, I think, 30 seconds, which is very long to stare at a girl. And actually, I normally never stare at girls, so that made it even more special. Then I was thinking to myself, okay, why am I staring at this girl? And then I went back home. And I was thinking, and then I walked past a magazine of my mother, because my mother has a subscription to a German fashion magazine. And sometimes when I'm in church, I draw and I sketch to pass the time. And one of my favorite models in that magazine was similar looking to the girl at the school. And then I realized why I was staring at her, because, you know, like most people, when they stare at a girl, they immediately conclude, you know, love at first sight or whatever. But I'm very scientific and analytical. So I want to get to the bottom of this. And then I realized that because she looked similar to the German model in the magazines, my brain was like, okay, is that or is that not the girl from the magazine, you know? And that's why I was staring so long. And then that got me thinking of, who do I find attractive and why? You know, because it's action, reaction, action, reaction. And with that thought, I went to bed that night. And then I woke up with a flashback of every single woman I ever found attractive. And that ranges from 15 to 60. So 15, 1, 5, 60, 6, 0. I repeat again, 60, because I explained that once to a guy, and because I made a documentary about pedophiles. His mind was so into pedophilia. He was like, "Oh, don't worry, Jan-Willem, don't worry. When you're older, I'm sure that you will find 40-year-olds attractive, even if you don't now." I'm like, dude, I'm already attracted to people that go as high as 60. So, yeah, that was the age range. And I looked at that age range, and I thought to myself, because I was 21 at the time, I was like, okay, I'm 21, but if my sexual attraction age range starts at 50, isn't that young? Or is that not pedophilia? And that's how everything got started.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that makes sense, actually. I think for the listeners who don't know, this movie came out when he was 23. It came out in 2012. It's so well put together, and it's your production company, JW Productions, and you did some of the music, or maybe all the music. You did a lot of the work on it. If you look at the credits, you did most of the work on the film, and so it blew me away that somebody that young, because usually you would think, it'd be hard to, as a young person, obviously it makes more sense. Okay, if I'm attracted to somebody who's 17 or 18 and I'm 21, 22, we're not that far apart. Why would I be asking myself these questions? So you would think that maybe somebody in their 30s or 40s would be asking, what's a pedophile, all these other questions. So to find somebody that young who's also intrigued in the subject was interesting. I mean, you went all the way back to ancient times and Stone Age, and really, I mean, you talked about culture and all these things. What did you did all this research? What was there any surprises in this research? What was the biggest thing that you're like, that really seemed intriguing that you might have not known before?
Well, as I did all the research, everything, started to make sense. I think my biggest surprise in creating this film was the distance and the sexism against men, and that's also why the sexism against men is in the synopsis, because that's one of the things that no man wants to talk about. I mean, it's absolutely taboo. Men will talk about pussies and vaginas all day long, but as soon as you bring up sexism against men, they also talk about sexism against women. There are two I think for the public, two very shocking things about this documentary. One thing that I did know going in, because I have to deal with pedophilia, and you also come in contact with child abuse, and how that works is that I realized how little people actually care about children. Me being an orphan, I already knew that. So that was not the biggest surprise. But the second biggest surprise was really the sexism against men and the distancing between men and children and women and men, because of the distancing between children. Because women generally, they distrust men with kids. And if women distrust men, then kids also start to distrust men, and then slowly but surely, it's getting more separate. Because we kind of live in a society these days where it's like you don't really have to get married, and people can be independent. And so more and more, due to the change in culture, the shift between men and children is growing bigger.
Yeah, it's intriguing because one of the things that you said early in the film was the fact that men's taste in women, or the age group that they find attractive, doesn't really change. It just expands. And that's an intriguing thing, because it's funny because, you look at construction workers or whoever working in the street, you see a woman walk by, and one that could look fairly young, and then they might think she's attractive. And the second that they find out her age, then it's almost like, oh crap, I did something wrong. Like, oh shit,
Yeah.
She's only 17. Oh, and all of a sudden you feel like guilty inside, like you did something wrong. When really, like your film says, when the Stone Age time, when you only lived till your 30s or 40s or whatever, you to get a healthy child, you almost had to start being sexually active right when puberty happened, or soon after puberty, because that was almost halfway through your lifespan. So it made perfect sense, and. What did your friends and family think when you were doing a film on such a taboo topic? Or are they as outgoing as you with looking at things outside the box?
My family isn't really outside the box, but they know that I've always been outside the box. So luckily they weren't that surprised, except when I told my mother, like, she literally like freaked out, walked away from the table, came back, walked away again. But that was her process of dealing with it. A couple of weeks later, she was like very proud, like, "Oh my gosh, my son is making a documentary." Or she tried her best to explain it to the people as well. It's like, "Hey, what's going on here?"
Yeah. Oh, hey, JW, you mind if I try calling you back with just audio? It seems like the feed might be a little weak, and sometimes if we do just audio and turn off the video, it helps with the feed. You mind if I give it a try?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Did you accidentally hang up?
No, I was hanging up and because I didn't know how to turn off both videos, so I just hung up and called you just using the audio to see if that would help with the connection. Because sometimes with past guests, anytime I've had an issue with a weak connection, if I end up just doing just audio, it ends up helping because I think it just takes up less energy to kind of just use the audio. So I think it might help with just the quality.
Should I keep my camera disabled or should I enable it?
Oh, you can just disable it if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, it's currently already disabled, but because you did an audio call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll give this a try just to see, because there's a couple times where we're just kind of going in and out a little bit, so I just wanted to see if this would help.
Okay.
So get back to what we were talking about. So what's your, there's a lot of conversation about, you look at like in religion, the different types of religion, and the thing about religions is I've always had this opinion that I think that the reason why there's so many Catholic priests, molesting children is that you're sexually suppressing them from what is probably natural for them to do, and that's to be sexually active. Is that something that you also think so? You think that could be also true, that maybe we sex is such a taboo topic, and we try not to, it's funny because it's like one of those things that, I forget who I heard say this. It's one of those things we all do and we all like, but we can't talk about it publicly, and do you think that making that topic such a taboo topic and in like religion, in the religion aspect, like I was talking about, do you think that could be one of the causes of it, is the fact that, maybe we are suppressing ourselves from these conversations, and obviously in religion, maybe even suppressing a priest from doing what's naturally, a natural instinct for humans?
It would be interesting to know for most people that actually in the past, the first priest, they could marry, they could have children, and so on and so on. But then later, the Catholic Church, they changed that. In the past, actually, priests were actually also known for their sexual appetite that sometimes even surpassed the average person. When they were allowed to marry and have children. And then, the church went over to say, okay, you cannot marry or have children. But, the truth is we all are sexual beings. And, you can kid yourself and place a ring on your finger and say, I'm married to God. But, God does not give you sexual satisfaction, and you still have sexual organs. So unless you're willing to totally sacrifice your sexual organs, you'll still be stuck with libido like the rest of us. So indeed, the problem is that, the general truth is this: there is actually no safe place for children. The sexual abuse in church is no more than it is in school actually it's less than it is in school or at home. So like literally you would have to place all the children on the moon for there to be no sexual contact. But then even then, children amongst themselves would probably also be sexual, at least some of them. So it's a tricky situation with the Catholic Church to say, okay, that is why there is an increase. But indeed, like you stated in the beginning, all people are sexual, and I think that the pretending that you're not indeed does cause the problems and does cause the cover-ups, and that makes it worse.
Yeah, are you familiar with the work of Christopher Ryan? He wrote the book Sex at Dawn.
No, I have not heard of that.
I think you'd be super intrigued with his book. It's he's one of my favorite people to hear talk about sex and really what's human nature and what's driven by culture and all these things. And he basically pushes the point that humans aren't meant to, that we're not meant to settle down with one other spouse and settle down. It's actually very unnatural. We always have this debate: is monogamy natural or not natural? Yeah. And I think that's an interesting topic, because I think that, we want to believe that, this way of I think culture and society puts these norms in us. We create these norms, and that's another thing, you hit on a little bit. It's just like, it's like nature versus nurture. Is culture basically molding our opinion on what a adult is and what is the proper age of being, sexually active, and I think that's, the problem with culture. Sometimes we forget that what ends up becoming culturally the norm or accepted doesn't necessarily mean it's natural, and it doesn't mean that we don't have other urges or whatnot. And I think that's similar to what you hit on is the fact that, even though culture, or at least Western culture in America and other, Western cultures, that, we say as an adult, 18, you're adult. If you're younger than that, then you shouldn't be sexually active. That's actually not necessarily what is natural for us, right? It's one of those things where the age of I know the age of pregnancy has gone up a little bit, right? It used to be lower and stuff like that. So would you agree with that that maybe culture could be a big part of it?
Yes, it's true. Like indeed, as you mentioned earlier, if we look in the past, if we look at history, the age of pregnancy for the average female was 13, and that is for, at least 90% of the human species, the history, 90% of the time, 13. It's only in recent years that age has gone up. And the reason for that is education, because in the past, what would happen was everything was basically about survival. But now, because of technology, we have all these luxuries, and, we can extend our lifespan. And one of the things that is very important for the average person today to succeed is to have a basic high school education, and high school education ends at 18. So that's why the age of pregnancy has slowly gone up. And that's mainly due to education, and also the age of consent, where it comes from. Because in the past, if you would have like a daughter, basically, and most people don't notice because even modern Western culture won't portray this, but for a long part of the human history, the world has not been friendly towards females. If you got a girl, then growing up in the past, in ancient times and in the Middle Ages, you couldn't wait to get rid of that girl, because girls could not work in the sense that they could get money. So that would only mean that they were a burden. So what you would have was a dowry. And like in modern Hollywood films, they always show that, the family has to pay the female so that the female can come into the family. But in reality, usually it was most of the time the other way around. So what would happen was that you would get a girl and you couldn't wait to get rid of her, and you would even pay somebody money to take her and to say, okay, now it is your problem. So that's also, what happened as soon as the girls became fertile, and that was, around the age of 13. They were then, pushed out and say, okay, go marry that person and, be somebody else's financial burden. And today, we see the exact opposite, where it's like, okay, stay as long as possible in the family and don't try to be sexually active, and so on and so on.
Yeah, and you even see that in China, where because you get taxed if you have more than one child, they have this epidemic of more males than females, because people are having abortions, or if they have a girl and then basically keeping the male, and now there's this incredibly uneven ratio of males and females, and basically if you're a female in China, you probably get to pick any dude you want, because there's just a bunch of dudes fighting over the same women. So it's probably similar. It sounds similar to what you're saying, like that in China they're still dealing with the same issues, where the male can work and can help the family, and the female's not as valuable when it comes down to those aspects. So that's interesting that they're still in that type of mindset.
Yes, that's true. It's from an ancient mindset, and it's slowly changing. Seeing that more and more women, are entering the workforce. But indeed, it's just back in the day, get married as soon as possible, and have kids. And that's also one thing that people talk about. Like I was watching TV in Holland, and there was a commercial that was sponsored, and it was a national call for help for some women in Africa. And basically it was like they showed two 16-year-old girls in a mall, and they were having fun and eating ice cream. And then they showed a 16-year-old girl somewhere in Africa. And then they said, well, this 16-year-old girl was pregnant. And you cannot get pregnant at the age of 16 because then you will have birth problems. And that's what this girl had. And that's why there was a miscarriage and she almost died. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the misinformation, they are literally lying to us, because at 16 you are mature. Sexually, nothing more is going to happen to your body to make you have kids better. So yeah, that is the kind of commercials that we see on TV, and then you have the reality. So yeah, it's pretty complex, or at least we've made it complex for ourselves.
Yeah, because there's still a lot of cultures today that have the consent age lower than 18, and you went into specifically at what caused that consent age to go up, and one of the things that you talked about was that males, historically would have, women would pick bigger and stronger males to protect them and whatnot. And for us to grow taller than women, we needed more time to mature physically and mentally. So that's why males, I think fully mature at 18 or sexually, and women at 16. Was that correct, or something along those lines?
It's true, and that's that's also the thing. Our nature and our natural design conflicts so much with our current morals, because basically what you have is we have the magical holy number of 18, which is inscribed in our brains. But the truth is, if you compare 16-year-olds to 18-year-olds, so 16-year-old girls to 18-year-old boys, there's something very interesting that is happening. And one of the main reasons was that in the past, because we were, a hunter-gatherer society and was survival of the fittest, in the past, like way back, men and women were basically the same size, but because of that, because of the competition, the larger the male, the more protection he can provide, the more food he can provide. So that's why men take 2 years extra to grow taller and stronger and bigger. And that's also why men are taller than women. But that came at a price. So basically what you have is you have women who are mature at 16 and men who should have been mature at 16, but they're not because they have to grow taller and stronger. But you do have then the woman already with sexual thoughts and that the body is already fully developed at 16. And then you have the men who only reach that at the age of 18. And then you have society where it's like, okay, everything under 18 is taboo, but sexually women are sexually mature. So then men, they prefer women who are sexually mature because they hit that peak. So basically what you have is you have a society saying everything under 18 is taboo, but at the same time, women are the most sexually attractive at age 16. And that's also why the average age of a high fashion model is also 16. And why we even have the saying, despite our moral complications, oh, she has the body of a 16-year-old, or, oh, I wish I had the body of a 16-year-old. We still have those cultural sayings. So indeed, the nature versus nurture, we're really stretching it.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing was the fact that you actually, I don't know how, but you got interviews with pedophiles that were on camera admitting that they had those pedophile urges. Was that hard to do? How did you,
It was not easy to find, definitely not. Except one, because I interviewed one pedophile who was actually in the pedophile party in Holland. So he was pretty easy to locate. But I also interviewed a female pedophile, and that was very, very difficult to find. And then it was even more difficult to convince the female pedophile to do an interview because I found the first one that I found said no, and it was actually so bad that I almost thought of giving up. And literally days before I gave up my search, I found the female pedophile, and she was willing to share her story. And yeah, it's very interesting because up to this day, there are many people who believe that female pedophiles do not even exist, and if they exist, then there are some people who are like, yeah, well, the boy should be happy that he got raped by the female pedophile. That's literally what people say, and literally, what I hear from people. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? It's almost crazy. This is beyond a double standard. This is just it's. Let me put it this way. When a boy gets, for example, raped by a female pedophile, he will have a harder time. Firstly, because if you are a man, you're always taught to be dominant, you're always taught to dominate and be masculine, and then that gets taken away from you. Secondly, you can't talk about it because there are very little, help centers and a social structure that supports that or that even acknowledges that you can get that you can get raped as a man. Like literally, there are countries where like, okay, this is not legally possible. Good luck. So then you have all these things that build up, especially for the male victims, and that's if you get lucky, if they believe you. So yes.
But isn't there cases like in America every once in a while we'll hear cases where there's a hot female teacher who ends up, molesting or having some sexual activity with a one of her students. And most guys, including myself, will be like, holy shit, that teacher's hot. Like, oh, I wouldn't mind if that happened to me when I was in high school. Or do you think that's one of those things where it's easier to say now as a adult, but if you're a kid? Because I almost feel like because guys are so sexually, once we hit puberty, our hormones are going. It's like we're just, we're so intrigued with sex, and that I almost feel like it wouldn't have the same mental effect, I guess. But am I wrong to say that? Or maybe is that just because I'm talking about their age range?
Okay. Here's the thing, right? And this actually, I think, maybe one of the weirdest things in the documentary and actually in real life. And that is that when we talk about female pedophiles, we talk about female high school teachers. But female high school teachers who have sex with high school students are not pedophiles. A pedophile is somebody who's attracted to somebody below the age of puberty or early puberty. So then we're talking about 13 or younger. And actually more pre-pubertal features. And if you are in high school, you don't generally fall into that age gap. So basically, and there, you get the sexism and the double standard already, where it's like when we talk about male pedophiles, we get the idea of this gross fat guy sitting in a basement, kidnapping kids and raping them or watching online child pornography. But when we talk about female pedophiles, we think about this hot, blonde, gorgeous teacher with huge double D breasts hitting on a 14-year-old and trying to get some. It's almost crazy the more you think about it.
Interesting that we all probably would have had the same breast size, the double D. I'm kidding. But you're right. That is like what most guys would imagine. And you're right. And this goes into another topic that I want to get into. And I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to clarify for our listeners that you got into what exactly the word pedophile means and what exactly age range it is, because we just look at anything under the age of what we consider adult, in this Western culture, but technically it's not, right?
Indeed. And that's also the entire, problem and why I started to make the documentary, because I was always told everything under 18 is taboo. But then the more you think about it, you're like, okay, this is ridiculous. I mean, if I'm 13 and I'm attracted to somebody who's also 13, are we both pedophiles? Or, how does that work? Or, if there's, 1 year age difference where I'm 18 and she's 17, does that make me a pedophile? And one of the most interesting things, I think, when making this documentary, because I literally went on the street and I talked to people on the street and I asked them their opinion about pedophilia. And, when you ask, what should you do with a pedophile? They will give you an entire list, like it's endless. Like, okay, you should choke them, you should burn them, you should cut off their genitals, you should send them to the moon, you should bury them alive. But when you ask them, what is a pedophile? Can you give the definition? They're blank. They're silent. They look at you with big eyes. They take one step back and like, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's the problem right there, where we have all these passionate and enraged and strong feelings about pedophilia, but we don't even know what it is.
And it's funny because that type of thinking kind of goes along with everything. Like on my podcast, we talk to people from alternative news, from alternative media, from different types of documentaries and activists and musicians and all this stuff. And one thing that it seems like that seems to be true is that there's a lot of people that are really passionate about their perspective on something without really know where that came from. You know, it's almost like culture and your surroundings has molded you into believing in something that you're not sure, that you've never questioned yourself. And, you know, you see that with politics, you see that with ideology, somebody who says socialism is bad or somebody who says capitalism is bad, you know, and a lot of people will just say, oh, socialism, that's crazy, or communism, you know, that's Soviet Union, you know, stuff. But yet nobody could actually tell you what the beliefs and ideologies behind it. And I think that, you know, it seems like, you know, the same type of thinking, that type of, you know, I've accepted this idea that we all agree that this is bad without ever really questioning what it is.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but I'll repeat it. The technical definition for pedophilia is somebody who is sexually attracted to someone below the age of puberty or early puberty. So we're talking 13 and under, but then even then, you know, the age of 13 and 10 is already a gray area. But if you want to put it plain and simple and, you know, define a pedophile on the safe side, then roughly 9 or 10 years or younger. So everything below that area, then you can be classified as a pedophile. And yeah, when you hear those numbers, you know, there's a huge difference between a 10-year-old and a 17 and a half year old. But, you know, society, you know, has this, moral magic number. And yet that's when the problems arise, you know, because things, they don't add up. And then, you get, sexism, hypocrisy, you name it, because, you know, this is also having a very bad effect on the children. And I don't know if you already want me to jump into the child pornography and what is going on there, because that I think is probably one of the most saddest stories, and it's where we create a situation that literally is or disadvantages children.
Yeah, we can jump into that, absolutely. Yeah, I know that in the UK, there's been a lot of media talk about people getting arrested for child porn and child molestation and all this stuff, and it seems like it's one of those things where just it's like you said, like we all agree that it's an evil thing, it's an evil, it's people. There's something wrong with those people and whatnot, but none of us. You know, a lot of people don't know what it is, and more importantly, I don't think we really have a grip on what causes it. Now, with your research and stuff like that, did you really, you know, establish an opinion on what you think causes, you know, pedophiles to be pedophiles, to get those urges? Do you think it's you're born that way, and it's what do you think from your personal opinion?
Okay, when we actually talk about actual pedophiles,
yes,
so real pedophiles according to the professional definition, then there are two ways to become a pedophile, and one is that, you know, you are genetically inclined, and another way is that you are abused as a child yourself. So when you are young and you get abused, you think that is normal, and that basically messes up your brain. So then when you're older, you know, you think, okay, this is what I was always taught. You know, this is that normal for me, and then you abuse others. In the second case, then it is more likely that there can be that it can be fixed, basically, you know, that you can do readjustment therapy. But in the first case, usually it's really it's really something for life. It's not like basically, also when you ask professionals and when they talk about pedophilia, it's not about following a course for, I don't know, a few years and then you're cured of pedophilia. It's usually something that people have to deal with for life, and then the dealing with it is that, okay, you accept that you have the sexual urges, but you do not harm children. Because one of the things that I also want to make very clear is that many of the extreme ideas against pedophiles and the extreme hatred for that is justified, because since the beginning of civilization, people have always hated people who rape and abuse children, because children, they are the weakest of the humans, the most vulnerable, and some of the worst tortures were actually reserved for pedophiles all throughout history. But then the problem arises when people don't know what pedophilia is, or they start expanding the definition of pedophiles, with the supposed everything under 18, and then you're cutting yourself in the finger, which actually brings me back to the whole child pornography thing, because when most people think of child pornography, they think of dirty videos that a fat old guy in the basement watches. But if you actually really knew the real definition of child pornography, you would be shocked.
Yeah. So you mean, yeah, because I mean, most people think that it's young teenagers and stuff like that, but obviously it can get much darker and sicker than that, right?
Well, actually, that's not what I mean. Most people they think of the dark and sick stuff, which is also child pornography. But what is also child pornography is, because the legal definition of child pornography is any sexual or lewd activity under the age of 18. So this basically also means that if you're 17 and a half, and even if you're wearing clothes, but you act lewdly and you film that or you put it on photo, you can go to jail and get charged with the creation of child pornography, with the possession of child pornography, and if you send it to your boyfriend or girlfriend, with the distribution of child pornography. And that could mean that you end up on the sex offenders register, which means you're actually ending up on the same register that it was actually designed to protect you from the people there. So it's really it's really a crazy thing, because child pornography is too broad, basically. But no country wants to tackle that issue, because they are afraid, like, okay, well, wait, why do you want to change the definition of child pornography? What, are you a pedophile, or on whose side are you on, and stuff like that. But yeah, the truth is, children are getting locked up and being charged with child pornography. That's how broad and how crazy the definition of child pornography has become.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now I remember the part of your film. Yes, when you talked about sexing and stuff like that, and yeah, it's pretty crazy, because you hear about people who maybe was 19 and their girlfriend was 17 or 16, and then they end up 3 years difference. They end up being married, having a family, but yet they have a record because somebody pressed charges on them, some parent who didn't like them or whatnot, and this person is considered a pedophile, or has that scar on their record forever, and it's because, like you said, this definition is so broad, and it really doesn't define exactly what it is, and that, like you said, even somebody, a kid sending a dick pic to somebody, it's like, and then somebody snapshots it. Next thing you know, it's you're basically making child porn, and so it just it is a slippery slope, and I think that some of the fear is what you mentioned. I think it's the idea that, how do you spark this conversation without looking politically bad if you're a politician, or looking like I guess even around friends and stuff like that, people start, somebody can just easily throw out, hey, what are you, a pedophile? You sticking up for pedophiles? So it's just like, it's very hard to bring up these conversations and question these things. And but that's the thing. Like, I think it's so important, no matter what your beliefs are, no matter what culture has designed you to or molded society as. It's okay to question things, and it's okay to figure out, why do I believe this? Is this all right? Is this not all right? And you did that, and I'll tell you, man, to do this film at 23 is freaking amazing, because at 23 I don't think I was as I'd like to believe that I was trying to see things outside the box, but I'm not sure I would have had the balls to really make a film like this if I had the talent like you do to do it, and even put it out and stuff like that. So I mean, that's my hat's off to you, man. I mean,
thank you.
I really appreciate you sparking these conversations, and actually, on that note, what was the feedback like? What did you get some feedback from critics, and was some good, some bad? What was that like?
Oh man, I've gotten death threats. I developed my own term, doc blocked. You have cock blocked, doc blocked. I quickly want to jump back quickly and then jump forward again to the death threat. With child pornography, we can even go a bit deeper and talk about the deeper political ramifications, because child pornography is also being used as a political tool to either silence opponents or create more censorship and control over the internet. This was actually also quite big in Russia, where the Russian government, used the child pornography to rewrite the internet laws, to censor websites, and then not to only censor sexual websites, but then any website that opposes to them politically, and then child pornography was used as the jumping bench to get that. So it literally does run much deeper. And when that was going on in Russia, Russia contacted me, and then they flew in their camera crew to interview me. And here's where we get back to the death threats and the doc blocking. I got interviewed, and it got put in the segment, and it got cut out the last minute. And unfortunately, I wasn't that surprised, because I also had television interviews that were canceled the last minute. I also had film festivals where somebody literally then broke in, deleted the file, the video footage of the film, where I literally got a call, I think it was 3 hours before the film was going to get shown, like, oh my gosh, can you upload it and can you resend it again because the file has gone missing? Also the Lolitas threatening the film festivals that wanted to show the film. Literally, calling them and emailing them, saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, if you dare show the film. And maybe I should say something about the Lolitas and also the whole death threat situation. Lolita is actually a Japanese term for a Japanese fashion style that mainly is about fully grown women and sometimes older teenagers wearing very childish clothes, very toddler-like, very, young-looking, very sweet, very innocent. And for my poster, I used a Lolita model, and basically it was a fully grown woman, but then in a very childish dress, with the tag. There are two sides to every story. And a large part of the Lolita community, so not all, some Lolitas, they were actually happy. They even wanted to order the poster, but a large part of them were furious. They started a petition, got over 10,000 signatures and death threats, and I got so many emails, so many hate mails. It was like literally like I came to my computer and I opened up my email program and I saw hundreds and thousands of emails. And at first I was like, hey, this isn't right. My computer is flipping out. But yeah, they did not like that.
So you thought maybe it was a virus or something, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's fucking crazy. But wait, so I don't get it. So is it a fashion thing, or is it some type of sexual preference? Is it like other in America, do we have like what, the fuzzies or whatever, when people dress up in
It's a fashion thing. So it's purely a fashion. It's a clothing style that people wear. And the thing in the Lolita community is, well, I don't want to use the term weird, but
let's use it.
They are already highly critical amongst themselves, basically. So it's basically like most women that are in that community, like either they're dealing with hate within themselves or hate from outside. But the thing, with my documentary is I don't want to
Oh boy.
bash anyone in my documentary, and I objectively analyze every situation, and I don't even mention the word Lolita in the documentary, and I talk and I explain Japanese culture. I explain it, so I don't demonize it or criticize it. I explain why it is as it is, where actually a objective person would actually come to the conclusion that I actually give a better understanding of Japanese culture, and seeing that Lolita came from Japanese culture and still is, that the average person would actually get a better view and understanding of Lolita from watching my movie. So in effect, I wouldn't say my movie is pro Lolita, but it does not give a negative image. It's actually more likely to give a positive image. But the Lolita people, when they saw the poster, they were like, screw this, we're going all out, we're going to get you. Yeah, luckily when most people watched the film, or most Lolitas watched the film, they calmed down and were like, oh my gosh, we were making a big deal about nothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so they got offended by the poster without watching the video, and then when even watching the documentary myself, you didn't shine a negative light on them. You just mentioned them, and just talked about that fashion style, which I find intriguing, because I think it does have something to do with the fact that maybe men it was another example of people being attractive to younger, females or whatnot. So that, I mean, it made sense to have it in there. And like you said, you didn't shine a negative or positive light on it. But that's the thing. It's like you can't do anything without offending somebody. And the fact that, you're hitting on such a topic that a lot of people, the only time they're ever talking about it is one, when they're saying, talking about a hot teacher, molesting a kid in high school, or when they're saying that all pedophiles should be locked up and killed and shot and, this and that. So it just, it's one of those topics that there's not a whole lot of conversation about. There's usually statements being made. There's not a whole lot of conversation about. So, I mean, I can see where maybe without watching the documentary, seeing the poster and then seeing the name of the documentary, you can get the wrong idea. It's, with me, I'm pretty open-minded. So when I saw the name of the documentary, and I've seen a lot of weird documentaries and a lot of different things, and so I didn't know what to expect. I could, I know that it could have went either way, and but I was delighted to find out that it was just a really interesting. It sparked interesting conversation. It made you rethink what we knew or what we thought we knew, and I thought that's a great thing, and I think that's a great thing. And what was there after making the documentary, or even while making it, when you had the idea of making it, was there a message that you wanted people to get out of it? Did you just want to spark the conversation and say, hey, let's rethink what culture has told you about what a pedophile is, and what a real pedophile is, and what culture tells you a pedophile is? Or was there any message or anything that you were like, okay, I hope people take this from my film?
Well, mainly I want to inform, and the funny thing is that also pisses people off, because they're like, oh my gosh, you should have made an anti-pedophile film, or you should have been pro this or pro that. But I mainly wanted to inform, give you the facts, give you the information, so that you can make an informed decision yourself. So that you have the information and the knowledge to now say, okay, that is and that is not pedophilia. Okay, it works like that, or it works like that. So basically, I wanted to inform, and luckily most people like that. But some people, they were really pissed off, and even most pedophiles do not like this documentary. And the funny thing is, the reason why they don't like this documentary is because of expectations. Because they see the title, they're like, oh yes, our prayers have been answered, the first pro-pedophilia documentary. But this documentary is actually not at all pro-pedophilia. So then they get really disappointed and they get really pissed. And then, you have the other side of the spectrum where people are like, I really hope this is going to be an anti-pedophile film. And it's not an anti-pedophile film either. This documentary is basically about us and the situation. So that's why you have, in the title, "All Men Are Pedophiles?" ? I look at our situation for all of us when it comes to the situation of pedophilia, because one of the twists in the documentary, and also what you can read in the synopsis and what we talked about earlier, is the effects, the social effects that we've created by labeling everything under 18 as pedophilia, because men have cut men have cut their own fingers basically by doing that. Because we are naturally attracted we find 16-year-olds the most attractive. So then you get this whole situation where it's like women are slowly backing away more and more from men. And to give some examples, because I know people find this hard to believe, but some solid examples are, there are certain airlines that have banned men from sitting next to children on the plane. And I'm not just talking about strangers. No, I'm talking about, even if it is your own son, the stewardess will come and will say, can you please not sit next to your own son, or can the mother come in between, because we have a policy of that. And, in bookstores, men are not allowed to be alone in the child section, and, and those are then the private laws that are being created. And then you have the general laws where it's like, okay, you're alone as a guy in a park, and okay, people are starting to ask, okay, why is that guy sitting alone there in the park? Is he a pedophile? So then you start suspecting everyone, and then the question, are all men pedophiles? So then you get this pedophilia hysteria and delusion. So yeah, that's it basically affects all of us. It starts with okay, what is pedophilia in fact, and then it ends with us. Okay, how is this affecting our lives?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think that it like we talked about earlier, it's one of those things where if you're attracted to somebody under 18, you automatically, like, what the hell is wrong with me? What am I, a pedophile? It's like it's one of those things where it ends up causing this. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it just, you end up second guessing if you're morally on the right side, and if you're morally a bad person, and all these things. Where we could easily look at somebody who's mature physically and could be 17 or 18 years old, and you could be sexually attracted to them, and because they're 17, you could think something's completely wrong. And then a year later, all of a sudden it's like it's legally all right. So mentally and morally, you must think, oh, it must be all right. But it's like, what really changes? It's funny how. I think that's the problem with society, is that we have these very strict rules but it doesn't make sense in every situation, in every scenario. And some, like you've mentioned, you highlighted the idea that, hey, we just use this age 18, but there's other countries where today that, in 2014, that the age of consent is lower, 16, 14, 15, and so it's one of those things where, we go to that country.
Even 9.
Oh, really? Yeah. And wasn't it Saudi Arabia that doesn't even have one, I believe, or not an official one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, and I think it was, and also another country. I think there were 2 or maybe even more that do not even have an age of consent. Yes.
Yeah, so now you look at it, okay, if I was raised in a country, I was actually born in Portugal, but I don't know what the age consent there is, but if it's 15 or 16, now if I'm sexually active with somebody who's 16 or 17, because culture tells me that's all right, I don't see anything wrong with what I'm doing. People around me don't see anything wrong with what I'm doing. But now I'm born, if I was born in America, raised here, and now the exact same actions, and it's looked down upon, and it looks like I have an issue and I need help. And so it makes you rethink what is really what's really the wrong or right thing to do, or what is it culture, molding our perceptions and opinions on things. And that's why your documentary was so intriguing to me, because you didn't really give us the answers as much as you gave us the information and let us come up with our own conclusion. And I think that's really important. I think that we have to do more of that. I think there's plenty of places where you can get opinion, that you can get somebody's opinion and they try to sell you that opinion without giving you any real information, or at least no information that contradicts their opinion. But it's nice when you watch something that gives you not so much an opinion, because even after I was done watching the documentary, I'm not even sure what your opinion was on the whole subject, which I liked. I liked that fact, because I think it was nice that you just gave all this information, and I never once felt like you had an agenda of trying to sell an opinion, if it was pro or anti or whatever. You just gave all this information and just let us come up with our own opinion on that subject based on that information. So I thought that was really important. I think that, most of us spend most of our time watching movies and listening to radio that only supports our opinions. And I think we should spend more time watching some, just getting the information and trying to filter out the opinion, get the information, and come up with your own conclusion. So I thought that was an awesome part of your film, the fact that you didn't really have. Did you get anybody asking you that, like, what is your opinion?
I hear it all the time, like, when I either at festivals or when I'm giving speeches and stuff like that. Afterwards, like, okay, oh my gosh, Jan-Willem, what is your opinion? I mean, I watched the movie, but what do you think? So yeah, that's indeed, the first question that I get. And then I know that I've done a good job, and I know that I've created an objective documentary. When people ask you for your opinion after the documentary, that my opinion is not in the documentary itself.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's the stamp of approval that, hey, you have, you did something neutral. You weren't trying to sell anything, any one idea, but you're giving the information, and that is. And the other thing is too, you're not straying away from getting some more hate mail, because your next documentary, I believe, that you're working on is just as I guess controversial, or at least can be as this one. So you have another project coming up, right?
Yes, my next documentary is going to be about incest, and as far as the level of controversy goes, I think compared to my first documentary, it will make my first documentary look like child play, no pun intended. But my next documentary basically is going to challenge the incest taboo, and at the same time, because there are two things, the challenge of the incest taboo, but it will also be the first documentary to, in a realistic way, explore how to reduce incest abuse. And you're probably thinking, what the F, aren't those two things the exact opposite? But they're actually connected. So yeah, I think that will definitely be a very exciting and challenging project, because basically, forget everything that anybody has ever told you about incest, because everything is going to be turned literally upside down.
Oh yeah, and thanks for sending me the link to your trailer too to the film. I thought it was a super awesome way and to finish the trailer when at the end of it you had somebody say, "Is there any advantages to it?" and then it cuts off, and I think that's that alone already like captured me. Like I wanted to know, I wanted to watch it, So I think that if it's anything similar to your last one, it's definitely gonna make us rethink things. And like I said before, I think that's really important. I think the way things are, we assume they're like this for a reason, but most of the time it's people who are in power who it's culture, it's powerful people who are policies, all these things that end up molding the way society works. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something's wrong with society, but what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way that society can be or should work or is right and wrong, and we have all those things figured out. And so I think that I think it's awesome that you're not straying away after the thousands of emails, that you're jumping right back into the fire and jumping right back into it. Are these your first two documentaries? What made you want to get into documentaries?
Well, actually, I never ever wanted to make a documentary. Generally, most documentaries for me are boring. They're like a boring style, a boring medium, like an action movie. It's got like action, excitement, pacing, and stuff like that. But the one thing, or at least two things. Like I said, I gave you the inspirational story. But then, as far as my character goes, I am very honest. If in similar situations, most people are like, well, I don't want to think about that. That's a little bit too dark for me. Or, it's a little weird. I'm like, okay, I want to know how things work, and I'm not afraid, to put myself in that position, to put myself in that honest position, because, to make the documentary Are All Men Pedophiles, you have to ask the difficult question first: am I a pedophile? That's how it starts. You have to ask that difficult question, and that's one thing that most people are not willing to ask. So also, with taboo subjects, I think if you really are honest with yourself, then you will come to the same conclusion, because there are many things in this world that don't make sense, either sexually or taboo or politically, as you mentioned earlier. And if you're honest, about yourself, then you'll also end up, I think, in the same boat as me. And the second reason is that I'm very curious. So, like, for example, when I was young, like when kids are young, they ask a lot of questions. They have like hundreds of questions, and they drive their parents crazy. And then, when they're older, it slowly decreases. But for me, that never stopped. I still have questions every day in my head, that I want answers to. So I'm just as hungry for questions and, wondering, how does this work and why does it work the way that it works now as I was when I was 5 years old. So, yeah, I think, my next project, about incest, I think will be a very interesting and, also I think the most challenging project that I've done up till now. Though we're currently still in the production phase, so we're looking for financiers and donators to complete the documentary. So if you know any people, or if there are any people out there who find this topic intriguing, I don't know, I guess you can contact Ricky, and he can give me my information, or you can go to the ourallmenpedophiles.com website and email me, and then I can give more information about it.
Yeah, underneath all our YouTube videos, I have I'll put links to our guests' websites and you know, any of their work and stuff like that. So if anybody is definitely interested in helping them out and helping them put out this what will definitely be interesting and you know, I will definitely get attention. I'll tell you that, either negative or positive, we'll see. But I hope people are open minded with these topics, because I think that, you know, I've had people on who talk about, you know, the way our economy works, you know, that, you know, the way we look at money and what is money, and is our, you know, a capitalist economy, is this the only way that things can work? Like all these things that we just accept because culture has told us to accept it as this is the way things should work and the way things do work. And I think it's important in all aspects and to do that. And I think that's why a lot of people get intrigued with philosophy. You know, I think the one thing I loved about just, you know, learning about philosophy and hearing people talk about it and reading about it is just the idea that it makes you rethink everything you know and everything you thought you knew. And it makes you reflect and makes you wonder who you are and all this stuff. And I think that, you know, what you said was beautifully put. I think that when you watch a movie like, you know, or you see a title like Are All Men Pedophiles, maybe some of the negative feedback is the fact that people are afraid of even asking that question. Maybe they're afraid of maybe that possibility even being there, and that's why they stray away from it. I mean, you hear stories about people who you know, are anti-gay marriage or anti-gays, and next thing you know, you find out that they were gay and they were fighting that urge. You know, they were in denial. You know, so I think that it's important to ask these questions. I think it's important to wonder why we believe certain things and do your research. And I think that it's awesome that you're not straying away from going into another kind of taboo topic. And I think it's important to do that. You know, I think honesty, when you meet somebody who's really honest, I think it's disarming. Like, it makes us feel like, because it's funny, because when I meet people, somebody who is really quiet and doesn't really give me their opinions, they make me a little nervous, because I'm always wondering what's going on in their head. Who are they? But somebody who's very outgoing and honest, even if I don't necessarily agree with them, it gives me the sense of security that I know who this person is. I know what they believe. I know what they think. I know who they are. And so, and I think people, there's something that people appeal to, you know, or people appeal to that, because you meet somebody and you start telling them about, you know, either a drinking issue you had or depression that you dealt with at a young age, you know, and sometimes I talk about that. I had a musician on not too long ago, and we talked about, you know, writing music and tapping into some of our personal issues and stuff like that. And I think that when you talk to people about that, or when you hear music that you relate to, there's something people like about that, about honesty. It reminds you that, like, holy shit, this person's having the same thoughts that I'm having, you know. And I think that sometimes we don't do that. We just kind of try to be this PR, or PC, I should say, person, and just always say what's politically correct, and you never know who the person really is. So I think that it's awesome to meet people who are honest, who are willing to look in the mirror and wonder, why do I believe these things, or who am I, you know, and I think that there's something, you know, scary about that. You know, I've talked to people in the past, other guests, about, you know, psychedelic drugs and stuff like that, and DMT and ayahuasca, and the idea of it makes you self-reflect, it makes you look in the mirror, and maybe who you see might not be who you think you are. You know, we might not be as good as people as we think we are. We might not be as selfish, as unselfish, and as we think we are, and all these things. And I think that you know, a lot of us would rather put out the perception that we are than actually be those things. And so I think it's awesome. And the thing about curiosity, that's in our nature as humans. We've evolved. I think a lot of it has been based on curiosity, and the idea that we're always trying to figure out how to make things better, or wonder how to, you know, what does this or what's that, or what's a better way of doing this. So I think that it's awesome. I think, unfortunately, as we get older, we become less curious. We use our imagination less. Then we just become these machines where we just go to work and do a crappy job, and then pay off your debt and die. So I think it's yeah. So I think it's important to
You summed up the majority of people's lives, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an unfortunate thing that, you know, humans are capable of so much more, and yet we've accepted the fact that most of us are, we basically go to a crappy job and barely makes ends meet, and while people have all this wealth that is just, ridiculous amounts of money that will never bring them happiness. And personally, I think it's probably some inner emptiness that they're trying to fill, or some sickness of addiction to money, the same way you would be addicted to alcohol or drugs or whatever. And so I just think that, we're capable of much more. And I think that, we need to start asking ourselves, is this the way society should be? Where things right now, income inequality in most of the world has skyrocketed. There's people dying of starvation. There's people who don't have water, but yet in America, there's people who have giant yachts who could feed, most of third world countries, just the price of that yacht, So it's, I think it's all these things that we need to question, and we need to look in the mirror and say, hey, things have to be like this, and so I think that type of thinking, that you having a good habit of second guessing not just your other people's beliefs, but your own beliefs. And I do that. I mean, I'm an atheist, but I tell people all the time that I'm like, either me being an atheist or me being whatever my beliefs are on anything, or whatever I think could help, whatever's wrong with politics, or whatever's wrong with this issue or that issue, nothing's set in stone. I'm open to conversation. I'm open to more information, and I'll keep molding my opinion as that information comes in. And we shouldn't stray away from having those conversations.
It's true. I think like at a very young age, basically I started to redesign myself, where it's like, okay, I'm going to assume that everything I have been told before is a flat out lie, and I'm going to empty myself and only build myself up with blocks where I know that it has been proven, or that it is objective, and not because somebody says so just because they say so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's there's something hard about, I've had people on this show, and we've talked about, history events, or any, anything that, you tell somebody. I just had Gerard Williams on, who wrote the book Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler, and he goes into that. And I've had James Corbett on, who's really popular for his video about 9/11 and what happened that day, and is there holes in that story and whatnot. And I think that anytime you say something to somebody which makes them rethink, what they believe, I think and we've talked about this, where your first reaction is to not believe it. It's like somebody telling you that reality isn't reality and this is just a simulation. Your first reaction would be, no, it can't be. No way. And so I think that it's hard for a lot of people to rethink who they are or what they know. And I think that anytime somebody tells you, that something you believe might be wrong, your first reaction is to deny it and not believe it. So I think that's a great way. I think that's great advice for anybody. Just rethink and really look in the mirror and reflect and just assume that everything like you said, is a flat out lie. And then if you get to the same conclusion, if you get to the same place saying that, okay, well, this did end up being true, then it was true, and that it wasn't just culture that or molded you into believing this, but it was because it really was true, and it's truly your actual opinion on something, and not something that was reinforced by media or culture and stuff like that. So I think that's an awesome way of looking at things.
Yeah, definitely. And culture makes it so hard for us, to follow that lifestyle, because when you're young, most people, they're raised with religion, and that I think is, for most people, also the best example of, like, okay, just believe, because that's literally it. So, like, no proof, just believe. And then it works out fine, unless, you meet another person who has a different belief than you, then, you're at odds, like, how are you going to resolve that? So, yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think religion is the perfect example of it, because I think a lot of people, including my parents, I've had this debate with my parents, even recently. We got in this conversation if, would I baptize my child, and they're like, well, you must baptize your child. What are you crazy? Why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, because I can't sit there in a church and pretend I believe the nonsense that we're doing is actually doing something. And I'm like, I just would feel like a fake person. I couldn't do it. And they're just like, well, just do it anyways because it'd be nice. And I'm just like, in my head, I realize, and a lot of times when I've had these debates with my parents about religion and being Portuguese, we're raised as Catholics and whatnot. And, at a young age, I was lucky enough where I did start questioning things and be like, none of this shit makes any sense. And it seems silly. And all the questions I have, nobody really has a answer that I'm happy with. And so it was just one of those things where, I end up, kind of breaking that mold and luckily enough and I would feel guilty as hell if I end up putting my kid through CCD or Sunday school and then baptizing them and and then saying, oh, once you get older, because that's the other thing. It's like, oh, once they get older, then they can kind of go make their own decision. Well, what if I end up molding a very religious person and then I can't convince otherwise, So it's just like I that to me, I just feel like that guilt would grow. But you're absolutely right. Religion. My parents are a perfect example of people who are religious. But if I get in conversations about the Gospels, the New Testament, the Old Testament, what it actually says, and the inconsistencies, and all these things, Martin Luther and all these stories, they know very little about it. You realize that they only believe in it because they're always told to believe in it, and they never questioned it. So it's not, it's in their heart, they really believe that they're believing for the right reasons, but you get in these actual conversations and in detail and you realize they know very little about even the religion that they support. So it's a perfect example of it.
Yeah, indeed. Like for me, similar situation. Let's see. Although I still consider myself a Christian, but I have I think a totally different view than most Christians. In that, for example, I don't believe that Jesus is like the son of God, as in, he's the only son of God. I think we're all children of God. And I don't see God as a guy with a beard in heaven, but I see him as, the beginning and the end, more kind of as a natural phenomenon that people, have tried to explain, like, okay, what is there before the Big Bang? That's the beginning. And what will be there at the end? That's the end, Alpha, Omega. More in that sense. And the thing about Christianity is, luckily, when I was young, I wasn't that stupid. So, for example, when my parents started to explain Christianity, there are some things that even as a baby I did not believe. It's funny. It's like my parents had an easier time convincing me that Santa Claus was real when I was a kid than that Jesus died for our sins.
Really? Why is that?
I mean, because if you think about it, it's the whole concept of, okay, Jesus dying for our sins, I think is actually more crazy than Santa Claus. Because, like when I was young, just like most of the other kids, I believe that Santa Claus was real because my parents they told me. And you see the present, you have like a little evidence going on there. But with Jesus, like I immediately, the first questions that I asked them was like, because my parents were like, okay, we are Christians and we believe in God and we will go to heaven. And I was like, okay, but not everybody's Christian, so what's going to happen to them? And then they're already scratching their head. I don't know. God will take care of that. And then they're like, okay, and Jesus died for your sins. And I'm thinking to myself, what the F? Okay, if Jesus died for our sins, what happened to all the people who were born before Jesus? Were they screwed? Or how does that work? And then they're like, yeah, I don't know, And they couldn't explain it. Up till this day, there is not a single Christian in the world. And believe me, I've asked as many of them as I could that can explain to me why Jesus died for our sins. I mean, the more you think about it, the more ridiculous it is, because basically it's like Christians believe that it's planned. So they're saying, okay, we believe in a kind and gentle father who is willing to sacrifice his own son for us. And I'm thinking to myself, why in the world would you trust a guy who is willing to send his son to be killed and be tortured, and then after all of that happened, is like, well, after killing and torturing them, I forgive your sins. Before you killed and tortured my son, I was like, you know what, I'm going to send you all to hell. But after you killed and tortured my son, I was like, hey, you know, maybe I should send you to heaven. Yeah, that's a good idea.
No, you're absolutely right. The idea of Santa Claus when you're a kid almost makes more sense because, like you said, you have the evidence that this idea that somebody died for their sins or died for our sins seemed even sillier because of the fact that, like you said, one, there's a lack of evidence, and two, there's a lack of explanation. No, how does that all even make sense? Because I've gotten in the same debate numerous times with I have Christian friends and Catholic friends and you know, you get in the same debate, and it's just like. They keep repeating the same thing. Yeah, he died for our sins, but why? And what happened before? What happened after? Well, why? If God is controller of all and can do all, why would he kill? Why would he let his own son be tortured just to make a point? I guess. Like, how does that even make sense? And it's just so many holes in the story. And again, a lot of these stories, you know, were written, you know, 100 years after Jesus, and word of mouth, and then a lot of them were, you know, only translated, you know, a long time afterwards, and there's gospels that they didn't use, and there's you know, there's more than one Messiah and all these things. So there's like all these things that make no sense, and you know, according to I don't know if it's the Old or New Testament that say you shouldn't be eating fish, and you shouldn't have tattoos, and all these things that, you know, a lot of just holes in the story. And like you said, most religious people don't really, if you bring up these questions, they really don't have the answer for it. But I think there's something about being afraid of dying and nothing happening. I think that scares the shit out of people. I think people are really afraid of the idea that when you die, nothing happens, you're in a hole, and that's it. And I think it's easier. I mean, anybody who's been to a funeral knows how sad people are, and the only thing that probably helps them a little bit is the fact that they truly in their heart believes that they went to heaven and that they're going to see them one day. But what if they knew that they weren't going to heaven and that they weren't going to see them one day? It'd be even harder. So I think, you know, to some extent, it's almost easier to believe in something, even if it makes no sense, than it is for some people to believe in nothing. And I think that might be some of the motivation.
It's true. I think religion, I think, had two main purposes. One, order and control, and another one is to manage the idea of mortality. Yeah, because I mean, indeed, that's one of the things, you know, that gets stuck, you know, in people's mind. You know, you realize for the first time, oh my gosh, you're gonna die, and then somebody says, okay, but don't worry, you're not gonna die because you believe in our religion, and everybody else who doesn't believe in our religion will burn in hell, but we will not because we are special. And you're like, okay, so I'm going to heaven, and then they're like, yeah, well, we're not sure, that's up to God. So yeah, you know, you get all of these, weird ideas. But then, you know, if you rationalize it to a certain point, it makes sense in that you just believe to conquer your fear of not knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, thanks, JW. I really appreciate your time, man. I know I went a little longer than I initially told you I was going to go, but I really appreciate the conversation. When conversation's flowing and you know, we're having these really interesting talks, it's hard for me to look at the time and cut it short, you know. So I really appreciate it. I hope that everybody, it's on Netflix. I hope people check it out, and you know, like I said, it's on Netflix, so most people now, you know, watch films on online and stuff like that. So definitely check it out. Click on it. You know, if you haven't heard of it, definitely watch it for a little bit. I'll tell you, just give it the first 5-10 minutes, and you're gonna be hooked. It's gonna be hard to turn it off, because I think that he goes from historically from, you know, how we get these temptations and urges and what causes them, and a bunch of other things. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to your next film and your future work, and hopefully I can have you on again to talk about your future film once that's released, and see how that's going. And like I said, I'm really interested to see how, you know, all the little subjects and topics and questions you're going to be provoking in the next film, and I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you hitting these taboo topics, because anybody can watch a film about the banking system, or a documentary about God knows what, that there's a billion of them made, but you're hitting on topics that there really aren't many documentaries or films or books that really hit on these things. So I think I appreciate the fresh air of getting something different, and not the same old thing, and going against the grain.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, indeed, I'll try to make my first documentary as good or better than the last, definitely.
Awesome. Hey, I'm looking forward to it, and like I said, keep in touch. When it comes out, I'll definitely be contacting you to have you on again and talk about it.
Okay, no problem. It's really nice talking to you.
Hey, you too, and good luck with your future projects.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Hey, have a good one. Appreciate the time.
Okay, bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks. Appreciate you guys listening. Hope you guys enjoyed that. He's such a awesome dude. He's so young too. His film work, and his ability to just put all these things into a interesting documentary is awesome. So definitely check it out. I know that a lot of these topics, people are like, why are you doing a whole podcast about this, or about a movie about pedophiles or whatever? But I just think that anybody who I knew that he probably got a little bit of backlash, and because something like that, a taboo topic, I figured he would, and I figured anybody who's willing to do that and go against the grain, and really the documentary is really good. It goes, you have historians in there, you have psychologists in there, you have really breaking down what is a pedophile and all this stuff. I just thought it was really interesting, and I think that it goes to this bigger picture, like I mentioned about 1,000 times on the podcast, this idea of our ideas and opinions and the way we look at things, or perceptions, really just a lot of them molded by culture. So I think he hits on a lot of interesting ideas and topics and stuff like that. And like I said, I couldn't believe how young he was. He was 23 when he did the film, and to be 23 and to not be afraid of social media or what his friends are going to think or whatever, and putting this out there. I figured maybe when you're older, you can kind of maybe do a documentary about that, and just really look at it as you don't care what people think as much. But when you're young like that, just so you figured, and when we're in our 20s, we just care so much about our peers and our surroundings, what their opinions are on us. So it's super interesting that he had the guts to do it. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate all documentaries that are super interesting. So like I said, definitely check it out. And we got some more podcasts coming up. I have Inner Party Systems drummer coming up. Jared is going to be a super interesting podcast. Inner Party System did break up, if you guys are wondering. They're not together anymore, but it's the drummer when they were together. And I also have Tom Segura, which I just saw recently at the Funny Bone, and talked to him there too. And we're still trying to figure out a day and time that we can get together. And actually, the Amazing Jonathan, another comedian, it said he would definitely be on. So that'll be super intriguing, because he's unfortunately he's not too good. He has some heart condition, and I actually saw him during his farewell tour. So hopefully I can get him on somewhat soon, and put that out and talk to him, because he has a super interesting story, super interesting life. So I think you guys will definitely appreciate that. And I'm mixing things up. I get a lot of filmmakers on. I'm trying to get more musicians, comedians, just anybody that I'm into, anybody that I find interesting, and I'll have them on no matter what they are or what they do. So thanks again, guys. I really appreciate everybody who listens, everybody who watches, everybody who shares and likes and downloads and whatever. I really, from the bottom of my heart, I love doing this. Today I worked outside all day, super hot. Just really didn't have any energy when I got home from work, and set everything up. And once we started talking, I loosened up, and I remember why I do this and why I enjoy doing this. I love talking to people from the other side. He's JW's from he's from Holland, from the Netherlands, and you know, just to be able to talk to people from there. And the reason why I keep calling him JW, because I was trying to get his name right before we started the podcast, but I'd always messed up. So he does a music project, and his production company is called JW. So he says that, you know, I can just use that abbreviation. So you guys probably are used to me messing up words anyways, but I figured I'd just go with JW, so I didn't mess up the flow of the podcast by trying to correct his name. So like I said, subscribe, download, let people know, and thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Believe in the ripple effect.